Imagine a place where a single day's drive can take you from wave-battered cliffs and lonely lighthouses to snow-dusted peaks, ancient forests, and a high desert that glows gold at sunset. A place shaped by fire and water, by restless volcanoes and relentless rivers. That place is Oregon. Stretching along the wild edge of America's Pacific Northwest, Oregon is more than just a dot on the map for hikers and road trippers. It's a living landscape of deep blue crater lakes, misty waterfalls, rugged coastlines, and quiet towns that still feel like they remember their frontier past. Today, more than 4 million people call this state home, spread across a region that was shaped first by indigenous nations, including the Chinook, Klamath, Nez Perce, Umatilla, and many others. Long before explorers and settlers arrived in the early 1800s. In 1859, Oregon became the 33rd state of the Union, joining the country during a period of rapid westward expansion. Railroads, river routes, and early trade connected its remote settlements to the rest of the nation, but even then, Oregon kept a character of its own. Much of the state remained wild, defined more by its mountains and rivers than by the towns built between them. That blend of natural space and human history continues to give Oregon its distinct identity, part frontier legacy, part modern sanctuary for people who come here seeking room to breathe. For many, it's a dream destination. For others, it's the trip they didn't know they needed. You're watching Era Trails, the channel where we slow down, look closer, and explore the stories behind the world's most remarkable places. If you enjoy thoughtful travel, scenic journeys, and documentaries that actually tell you why a place matters, you're in the right place. Before we set off across Oregon, a quick note. If you find value in videos like this, consider subscribing to Era Trails and tapping the like button. It helps more travelers and lifelong learners discover this kind of in-depth content, and it tells us to keep going, deeper and better, with every episode. In this documentary, we're not just ticking off landmarks. We'll follow the rivers and roads that stitch this state together, from the waterfalls and historic highways east of Portland to the wide-open central deserts and volcanic landscapes around Bend. From the quiet, forested lakes and alpine valleys, all the way out to the sweeping beaches and sea stacks of the Oregon coast and the remote canyons and high plains of the east. We'll explore how the land was formed, how people shaped their lives around it, and why so many visitors come here once and keep coming back. So, settle in. Imagine the road rolling out ahead of you. Welcome to the wonders of Oregon. To understand Oregon, we will begin with the forces that shaped it. Before towns, before roads, before people ever set foot here, this land was carved by fire and refined by water. a landscape built on collisions, eruptions, and the slow, patient work of erosion. Some of Oregon's most extraordinary places are the direct result of that story. Deep basins left by ancient explosions, cliffs sculpted by rivers, and valleys defined by the movement of time itself. And there is no better place to start than at the heart of one of the most remarkable natural landmarks in the United States. Crater Lake is the kind of sight that stops even seasoned travelers mid-sentence. Formed nearly 8,000 years ago, when Mount Mazama collapsed after a massive volcanic eruption, the basin that remained slowly filled with centuries of snow and rainfall, creating the deepest lake in America and one of the clearest anywhere on Earth. The first thing visitors notice is the color. Not blue as you typically imagine it, but a deep, almost impossibly rich shade that shifts with the sun. On a calm day, the surface becomes a mirror, reflecting the surrounding cliffs in perfect symmetry. On a windy day, the water darkens, giving the lake an almost mysterious weight. The rim crests more than 7,000 feet above sea level, offering viewpoints that make the entire crater feel like a world unto itself. Wizard Island rises from the water like a reminder that the mountain sleeping beneath the lake is not entirely gone, just transformed. For many travelers, Crater Lake is more than a photo stop. It's a place to slow down, drive the rim, walk the overlooks, watch shadows drift across ancient volcanic walls. Even in the height of summer, it carries a quietness that feels rare today. And as we leave this caldera and head northward, Oregon's story continues along rivers, cliffs, and canyons shaped by equally powerful forces. The high volcanic rim gives way to forests, and those forests slowly gather into a corridor of water and rock that has guided people, trade, and weather patterns for thousands of years. Here, the Columbia River doesn't just cut through the landscape, it creates it, chiseling out a vast gorge on the northern edge of the state. Tucked into one of its steeps, moss-covered walls, is one of the most recognizable sights in the Pacific Northwest. Multnomah Falls isn't the tallest waterfall in the world, or even in the United States. But very few waterfalls are as instantly arresting, or as accessible. Just a short drive east of Portland, the falls drop in two main stages for over 600 feet, spilling down a sheer rock face that looks like it was built specifically for postcards and paintings. For many visitors, the experience begins at the base. From the viewing area, you can feel the fine mist in the air, hear the steady roar of water, and see the iconic arched footbridge that spans the lower cascade. It's a scene that feels timeless. The white curtain of the falls, the dark basalt cliffs, and the green of ferns and moss clinging to every surface. A short walk takes you onto Benson Bridge itself, suspended between the upper and lower tiers. From there, the falls feel closer, more immediate. You can look up into the narrow cleft where the upper drop begins, or look down to watch the water crash into the pool below before continuing on toward the Columbia River. What makes Multnomah especially appealing to travelers is how easy it is to enjoy. You don't need a long hike, special gear, or perfect fitness. The main viewpoints are close to the parking area, and for those who want a little more, there are trails that climb higher into the surrounding gorge, offering quieter perspectives. Multnomah Falls is more than a scenic stop on the highway. It's a first introduction to the Columbia River Gorge, a hint of just how dramatically water and time have shaped this northern edge of Oregon, and a doorway into one of the most remarkable river corridors in the country. The Columbia River Gorge is where Oregon's landscape opens up and shows its structure. Stretching roughly 80 miles east from the outskirts of Portland, this vast chasm cuts straight through the Cascade Range, forming the border between Oregon and Washington. From above, it looks like a deep green scar carved into the mountains. From the road, it feels like traveling through a long stone cathedral shaped by wind, water, and time. Here, the Columbia River doesn't just flow, it dominates. For thousands of years, it has carried salmon, people, trade, and stories. Today, it carries something else as well: the sense that we are moving through living geology. Sheer basalt cliffs rise on both sides. Season after season, waterfalls pour over their edges, feeding creeks that tumble down to meet the river below. One of the best ways to experience the gorge is along the historic Columbia River Highway. Built in the early 20th century, this road was designed not just for efficiency, but for beauty. Its viewpoints, stone guardrails, and sweeping curves were carefully placed to reveal the landscape, not hide it. From classic stops like Vista House at Crown Point, we get a wide, elevated view of the river winding through the mountains, a scene that feels both vast and surprisingly peaceful. Deeper into the gorge, the air cools and the forests thicken. Waterfalls become a constant presence. Multnomah may be the most famous, but it's just one in a chain. La Tourelle, Yaquina, Bridal Veil, Horsetail, and many more, each with its own character. Some fall in single drops, others fan out over the rock in delicate veils. Short trails lead from the road into quiet, green amphitheaters where the sound of traffic fades and only the rush of water remains. As we travel east, the character of the gorge changes. The dense, mossy forests slowly thin. Evergreen gives way to open hills and grasslands. The cliffs become drier, more rugged. It's a subtle reminder that Oregon is a state of transitions, from wet to dry, forest to high desert, all along a single river. For many visitors, the Columbia River Gorge is where an Oregon trip begins to feel complete. It offers easy viewpoints for those who want to stay close to the car, rewarding hikes for those who want to go farther, and enough history, geology, and quiet scenic moments to keep anyone engaged. It's a place where we can watch clouds drift along the ridgelines, see freight trains and barges move through the corridor, and understand that this has always been a passage for water, for people, and for time itself. Leaving the Columbia River Gorge, the landscape begins to open and soften. The steep basalt walls ease into rolling foothills, and the air grows heavier with the scent of the ocean long before we ever see it. The road west threads through small towns and forested corridors, following the curve of the land as it leans toward the Pacific. It's a subtle shift at first. The light changes, the wind changes, and then, suddenly, the trees part and the horizon widen into blue. This is where Oregon meets the ocean, and where one of its most photographed coastlines waits. Cannon Beach is one of those places where the first impression lingers. The beach is long, open, and framed by shifting Pacific light that can make the same scene feel entirely different from 1 hour to the next. But the landmark that defines it, the one people remember long after they've gone home, is Haystack Rock. Rising 235 feet from the shoreline, Haystack Rock is the exposed tip of an ancient lava flow that originated hundreds of miles inland. Over millions of years, the Pacific carved away at the surrounding rock, leaving this single volcanic monolith standing alone in the surf. Today, it's both a geological testament and a symbol of the Oregon coast itself. At low tide, tide pools gather at its base, revealing bright starfish, sea anemones, and small crabs moving among the rocks. Puffins nest on the upper ledges in the spring and summer, giving the rock a quiet pulse of life that visitors often miss at first glance. The combination of rugged stone, wildlife, and changing tides gives the place a rhythm that encourages adventurous souls to slow down and just watch. Cannon Beach holds its own story as well. Named after a cannon that washed ashore in the 19th century from the wreck of the USS Shark, the town grew from a small settlement into a coastal retreat known for its art galleries, wooden storefronts, and peaceful pace. It's a rare place where the commercial edges haven't overtaken the scenery. The town feels shaped around the landscape, not imposed on it. What sets Cannon Beach apart is how approachable it is. The beach stretches easily for miles, offering long, level walks where the sound of the waves sets the cadence. Early morning brings soft pastel skies and quiet footprints in the sand. Evenings often end with silhouettes of families, photographers, and travelers watching the sun drop behind the sea stacks. For many, this coastline isn't just another scenic stop. It's the moment the Oregon coast becomes real. Wide beaches, cold seas, and the enduring presence of Haystack rock create a sense of place that stays with people long after they leave. As the road continues north, the shoreline begins to fold into headlands and harbors, guiding us toward another chapter of Oregon's coastal story. The towns grow older here. The forests press closer to the water, and traces of the past begin to appear in the quiet architecture along the highway. Before long, the road reaches the mouth of the Columbia River, a place where ships, explorers, and entire chapters of Northwest history first converged. Astoria feels different the moment we arrive. The coastline tightens into a working waterfront. Streets climb the hills in layers, and the river that carved the gorge now widens into its final tidal stretch before meeting the Pacific. This is not just another coastal town. This is one of the oldest chapters in the story of the American West. Founded in 1811 as Fort Astoria by agents of John Jacob Astor's Pacific Fur Company, this was the first permanent American settlement west of the Rocky Mountains. It began as a fur trading post, positioned deliberately at the mouth of the Columbia to control access to the vast interior. Only a few years earlier, the Lewis and Clark expedition had wintered nearby at Fort Clatsop, mapping and recording a region that was still largely unknown to the United States. Astoria grew slowly, shaped by trade, timber, and the sea. Fires destroyed large parts of the town more than once, yet it was rebuilt each time, its streets and wooden piers extending over the marshy edges of the river. Today, around 10,000 people live here, in a city that manages to feel historic without becoming a museum piece. Old Victorian houses sit on the hillsides. Warehouses and canneries along the water have been converted into shops, galleries, and cafes. Above it all, the Astoria column stands on a hilltop, offering wide views over the river, the bridge, and the open ocean beyond. Visitors come here for different reasons. Some follow the trail of Lewis and Clark, tracing the final steps of the expedition. Others are drawn by the town's maritime heritage, the bar pilots who guide ships across the dangerous Columbia River bar, the old cannery buildings, and the sense that this has always been a working port. Many arrive knowing Astoria only as a backdrop from films, then stay longer than planned once they start walking the streets and looking out over the water. What makes Astoria special is the feeling that the layers of time are still visible. Modern traffic moves across the long Astoria-Megler Bridge, but below it, the river continues its slow, patient movement to the sea, just as it did when fur traders, indigenous canoes, and early steamships shared these waters. Old photographs of the waterfront look instantly familiar because the basic lines of the town have hardly changed. For travelers tracing Oregon's coastal route, Astoria marks both an ending and a beginning, the end of the Columbia's journey and the gateway to the open Pacific. From here, we can follow the river's last bend out toward the ocean, or turn south again along the coastline, where headlands, cliffs, and lighthouses stand watch over the restless sea. As the highway dips and rises along this stretch of the coast, the landscape shifts once more. The broad beaches around Astoria give way to sharper points and darker stone. Waves break against basalt headlands that have stood for millions of years, and the coast becomes more rugged, more dramatic, as if reminding us that this part of Oregon has always been shaped by wind, weather, and deep volcanic history. It's along one of these headlands, a place where black basalt meets the full force of the Pacific, and a lighthouse has kept watch for more than a century, that our journey continues. A little farther south lies Yaquina Head, a striking point of land that captures the very essence of Oregon's coastal character. That's where we're headed next. This is one of those rare places where history and coastline meet so cleanly that the two become inseparable. The story begins with the lighthouse. Completed in 1873, the Yaquina Head Light stands at the westernmost point of the headland, built to guide ships along a notoriously unforgiving stretch of the Pacific. At 93 feet tall, it is the tallest lighthouse in Oregon, its brick tower rising from solid basalt with a steady calm that has endured for generations. Inside, the original first-order Fresnel lens, crafted in France in the late 1860s, still sends its pattern of light nearly 20 miles out to sea. For decades, lighthouse keepers and their families lived here in relative isolation, maintaining the beacon through storms, fog, and long coastal nights. In 1939, the U.S. Coast Guard took over operations, and during World War II, servicemen watched from this very headland for any sign of enemy activity offshore. The automation of the light in 1966 ended the era of resident keepers, but the building remained active, and in 1993 it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, formally preserving its role in Oregon's maritime past. The land beneath it tells an even older story. Yaquina Head is the remnant of an ancient lava flow, a thick tongue of basalt that proved far more resilient than the softer coastline surrounding it. As the Pacific eroded the shore over millions of years, this basalt remained, forming the mile-long promontory that now extends decisively into the ocean. The cliffs are steep, the surf is constant, and the headland has the unmistakable feeling of a place shaped by both fire and relentless waves. In 1980, Congress designated the area as the Yaquina Head Outstanding Natural Area, recognizing that this was more than just a lighthouse site. It was a complete coastal ecosystem worth protecting. Today, visitors can step into that landscape at their own pace. The interpretive center near the entrance tells the story of the light, the geology, and the people who lived and worked here, grounding the experience before anyone even reaches the headland. Just below the cliffs lies Cobble Beach, a shore made of smooth, dark stones that shift and clatter under each wave. At low tide, the beach becomes one of the most revealing tide pool habitats on the Oregon coast. Sea stars, anemones, and delicate intertidal life appear in the shallow water, turning a simple walk across the rocks into an unexpected window into the marine world. Offshore, basalt islands serve as nesting grounds for seabirds, and harbor seals often haul out on the lower ledges. In the right season, it isn't unusual to look up from the tide pools and see the distant plume of a migrating gray whale passing just beyond the headland. The entire area is threaded with short pathways that lead to viewpoints along the cliffs. Each one offers a slightly different encounter with the Pacific, from exposed, wind-swept overlooks to quieter corners where the sound of the waves feels almost meditative. Even the atmosphere shifts with the weather. On bright days, the lighthouse stands sharp against the sky, and the coastline stretches far to the north and south. On foggy mornings, the world becomes smaller. The foghorn sounds at intervals. The beam of the light cuts through the mist, and the rock beneath your feet feels older somehow. Yaquina Head has even found its way into popular culture. The lighthouse has appeared in several films, most famously serving as the Mosco Island Lighthouse in The Ring, a testament to its cinematic presence and the rugged solitude of the landscape around it. But beyond the films, beyond the photographs and the guidebook descriptions, what people tend to remember is the feeling of standing there. The height of the cliffs, the cold Pacific wind, the deep sound of waves meeting basalt, and the lighthouse keeping its steady watch as it has for more than a century. It captures the essence of Oregon's coast, resilient, weathered, and quietly awe-inspiring, shaped by natural forces and human stories that continue to intersect at the edge of the sea. Leaving the shoreline behind, the landscape begins to shift once again. The air dries, the forests thin, and the broad sweep of the Pacific gives way to the open interior of the state. Roads stretch inland through rolling foothills and quiet agricultural towns, gradually climbing toward a region shaped not by tides, but by ancient volcanic forces that left their mark in stone. It's here, in the heart of Central Oregon, that some of the state's most dramatic formations rise abruptly from the high desert. Our next stop brings us face to face with one of the most striking of them, a place where sheer rock walls and golden cliffs reveal a different chapter of Oregon's geological story. Smith Rock rises out of Central Oregon's high desert with an abruptness that makes it feel almost unreal, and even its name carries more than one story. The origin isn't settled. Some accounts say it was named after John Smith, a Linn County lawman and early Oregon legislator who discovered the rock and gave it his name. Others tell a darker story, that it honors a soldier, Private Volk Smith, who fell to his death here during an 1863 skirmish in the Snake Indian War. The official history acknowledges both versions, and the debate over which one is true still lingers. Long before either of those men arrived, this was already a lived-in landscape. The area around Smith Rock lies within the ancestral territories of indigenous peoples including the Northern Paiute, Warm Springs, Wasco, and related bands, who moved through this region for thousands of years. They hunted, gathered, fished along the Crooked River, and held ceremonies connected to the cliffs and canyons that surround it. For many descendants today, Smith Rock is not just a park or a climbing area, but part of a sacred homeland whose stories predate American settlement by a very long time. Modern development arrived late compared to the coast and the Willamette Valley. The state gradually acquired the land for a park between 1960 and 1975 through purchases and gifts from the city of Redmond and private landowners. Today, Smith Rock State Park covers a little over 600 acres near the small community of Terrebonne, with the larger town of Redmond nearby. It sits in that transitional zone where irrigated fields and ranch land stop and the open high desert begins. The rock itself tells a different story again. Smith Rock is part of the Crooked River caldera, formed around 30 million years ago when overlying rock collapsed into an underground magma chamber. Layers of welded tuff and ash from ancient eruptions were later capped by younger basalt flows. Over time, the Crooked River cut deeply into these layers, leaving sheer walls of pale volcanic rock rising above the water. In the right light, the cliffs glow gold and orange, with sharp ridge lines and pinnacles that look almost sculpted. In the late 20th century, those cliffs helped define an entire sport. Smith Rock became widely known as the birthplace of modern American sport climbing, with routes that pushed difficulty standards and attracted climbers from around the world. Even if we're not here to climb, it's hard not to notice ropes on the walls, tiny figures moving across the faces, and the quiet concentration of people working their way up the rock. For most visitors, though, Smith Rock begins at the canyon rim. From the main parking area, the first view drops down into the Crooked River Canyon, with the river looping at the base of the cliffs and trails threading along both sides. It's a view that can hold you for a while before you even start walking. The classic way to experience the park on foot is the Misery Ridge Loop, a steep but rewarding circuit that drops from the rim, crosses the footbridge over the Crooked River, and then climbs sharply up the switchbacks on the far side. Despite the name, the path is well built and offers frequent chances to stop and look back at the river and the walls below. From the top, the view changes completely. The canyon falls away on both sides. The central Oregon landscape spreads out toward the Cascades, and one of Smith Rock's most famous features, the freestanding spire known as Monkey Face, comes into full view. On calm days, you might see climbers silhouetted on its summit, tiny against the sky. For a gentler introduction, the river trail follows the Crooked River at the base of the cliffs. Down here, the rock towers above and the mood is quieter. The path winds past climbing areas, pockets of shade, and stretches of still water where birds hunt and reflections gather. Mule deer often move through the brush, and raptors circle overhead, using the thermals rising from the cliffs. It's easy to walk as far as you like and then simply turn back when it feels right. Smith Rock is open year-round, but the experience changes dramatically with the seasons. Summer brings long days and clear skies, but it also brings heat. Temperatures can climb well into the 30s and even low 40s Celsius, and the exposed trails offer little shade. Many visitors choose to arrive early in the morning or later in the afternoon during these months, timing their hikes around the worst of the midday sun. Winter can be cold, with frosty mornings and occasional snow, yet the low angle of the light and the quiet trails have a strong appeal for those prepared for it. For most people, the best times to visit are spring and autumn. From March to May and again from September into November, temperatures are generally milder, the light is softer, and the crowds thin out compared to the peak summer season. Wildflowers appear on the slopes in spring, while autumn often brings crisp air and clear views of the Cascades on the horizon. Whatever the season, the park operates as a day-use area from dawn to dusk, with a simple walk-in campground for those who want to stay close and watch the rock change color from first light to last. In the end, what stays with most visitors is not just the height of the cliffs, but the contrast. A river quietly cutting through the base of a canyon born from violent volcanic history. A place that was once sacred ground, later a frontier landscape, and now a state park where hikers, climbers, and sightseers share the same views from different perspectives. Smith Rock is where Central Oregon's high desert begins to show its full character, open, exposed, and unforgettable, with stone and sky doing most of the talking. As we leave the cliffs behind and continue south, the landscape widens again. The sharp volcanic shapes give way to sagebrush plains, ponderosa forests, and long open stretches of road that seem to lead deeper into Oregon's interior story. Not far from here lies Bend, a city built at the meeting point of wilderness and community, where the high desert meets the eastern slopes of the Cascades. It's a place where outdoor life shapes the rhythm of the town, and where one museum in particular ties the region's natural history, human history, and wildlife into a single narrative. That's where we're headed next. Bend sits at that hinge point where Oregon's forests give way to high desert, and its story has always been about that meeting of edges. The city grew up on a bend in the Deschutes River that early settlers used as a natural crossing point. In the 1870s, a ranch called Farewell Bend gave the place its name. When a post office was established, it was shortened simply to Bend. By 1905, it was officially incorporated with a few hundred residents. Rail lines arrived in 1911, followed by two huge sawmills in 1915, turning this quiet crossing into a serious timber town and pushing the population past 5,000 within a decade. When the big mills began to close in the late 20th century, Bend could easily have faded. Instead, it shifted. Timber gave way to tourism and outdoor recreation, riverfront mill sites were reborn as the old mill district, and the city leaned into its mountains, rivers, and trails as its new economic backbone. Today, more than 100,000 people live here, making Bend the largest city in Central Oregon and one of the fastest growing in the state. It still feels like a place built around the river, but the scale is very different from the logging town it once was. Just south of the city, set back in Ponderosa Forest, the High Desert Museum tells that larger story in one place. Opened in 1982 and founded by wildlife biologist Donald M. Kerr, the museum sits on 135 acres of pine-covered land and combines indoor galleries with outdoor habitats and historic buildings. Its mission is simple and ambitious at the same time: to bring together the wildlife, cultures, and history of North America's high desert so visitors can see how they fit together. Over the years, it has grown into the largest cultural institution east of the Cascades in Oregon, drawing well over 150,000 visitors a year and earning accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums, Smithsonian affiliate status, and national recognition for its work. Inside, the story unfolds in layers. One wing focuses on indigenous nations of the plateau, with exhibits that trace life before and after reservation confinement and highlight the resilience of native communities across the high desert. Another major section, often called Spirit of the West, walks us through fur-trapping camps, wagon routes, mining claims, and early boomtown streets, showing how settlers reshaped the land and how the land, in turn, shaped them. You don't just look at cases here. You move through reconstructed streets and camps that feel like stage sets for the history being told. Then there's the wildlife. The desertarium brings you close to the reptiles and small animals that usually stay hidden: lizards, snakes, turtles, and other desert specialists. Outside, river otters move through a purpose-built habitat, while porcupines, bobcats, and other mammals live in spacious enclosures along a network of forested paths. The Donald M. Kerr Birds of Prey Center houses eagles, hawks, owls, falcons, and even vultures, many of them non-releasable rescues that now act as ambassadors for their species. On many days, staff and volunteers run scheduled encounters and flight demonstrations where guides introduce individual animals, talk through their stories, and answer questions. Living history is another thread that runs through the grounds. A short walk from the main building brings you to a recreated 1904 ranch and sawmill where interpreters in period clothing demonstrate daily life. Tending the garden, working the barn, cutting boards at the mill, or explaining how early homesteaders made a living in this harsh climate. On a good day, you can move from a bird of prey talk to a ranch demonstration and then back into the galleries and feel like you've covered a century and a half of history without leaving the property. For most visitors, the best way to approach the museum is to treat it as a half-day anchor rather than a quick stop. Mornings often work well. You can arrive when the doors open, catch the first animal encounters or ranch programs, and still have time in the afternoon for the rest of Bend. The museum is open year-round, but spring and autumn have a particular draw. The roads are clear, the weather is usually mild, and the summer crowds haven't fully arrived or have already thinned out, making it easier to move at your own pace. Summer brings long days and a busy schedule of programs. Winter offers a quieter, more introspective experience, especially when there's snow in the trees around the grounds. Back in town, Bend itself works as a base camp. The Deschutes River runs straight through the city, with parks and paths like Drake Park and the River Trail giving easy access to the water. To the west, the Cascade Lakes Scenic Byway leads to a string of alpine lakes and trailheads. To the south, Newberry National Volcanic Monument opens up a whole other volcanic landscape of caldera lakes, lava flows, and caves. Bend has leaned into that role as a recreational hub, with everything from rafting and mountain biking in summer to skiing and snow sports in winter. When it comes to staying here, there's a full spectrum: riverside lodges and higher-end resorts, mid-range hotels near the Old Mill District, and smaller motels and rentals tucked into residential streets. The exact choice depends on budget and how close you want to be to either the river, downtown, or the highway heading out toward the Cascades. What matters for our purposes is that Bend gives you something many interior towns don't. You can spend the day at a museum, on a trail, or out on the water, and still walk to dinner without feeling like you're compromising on comfort. Food is very much part of the Bend experience. The city's reputation for craft beer is well earned. Deschutes Brewery started here and remains one of the area's most iconic spots, joined now by a long list of local breweries and brew pubs that pair their beer with solid, often locally sourced food. Beyond beer, you'll find classic drive-ins and old-school taverns alongside newer farm-to-table restaurants and international kitchens. Some local guides point out things like sourdough scones at long-running spots, burgers at retro drive-ins, and seasonal menus built around Central Oregon produce as must-try experiences while you're in town. It's not about chasing a single famous dish, so much as enjoying how the food scene has grown up alongside the outdoor culture. For a lot of people, Bend and the High Desert Museum end up being the moment when Central Oregon stops feeling like a blank space on the map and starts to feel like a region with its own rhythm, shaped by rivers and lava, yes, but also by logging camps, indigenous stories, wildlife rehabilitation, and a modern town that has learned to make the most of its surroundings. From here, the road can bend toward even more volcanic ground, calderas, lava flows, and a wider view of just how active this landscape has been beneath our feet. Heading south of Bend, the forest opens into a vast volcanic basin that reveals the scale of that activity. Here, the land rises and falls in long arcs of old lava, warm springs gather in quiet lakes, and entire hillsides sparkle with obsidian. This is Newberry, a volcanic world of its own, shaped by eruptions far larger than anything seen in the Cascades today. That's where our journey takes us next. Just south of Bend, the forest suddenly gives way to a different kind of landscape. Here, hills rise and fall not because of tectonic folding, but because a single enormous volcano once dominated the region. Newberry is not a sharp, conical peak like some of the Cascades to the west. It's a broad shield volcano, sprawling across more than 1,000 square miles, with a collapsed summit that now holds lakes, lava flows, and forests growing over ancient fire. The story begins deep in the past. Over hundreds of thousands of years, Newberry erupted again and again, sending out lava flows and ash that shaped much of Central Oregon's surface. Eventually, a series of large eruptions emptied part of the magma chamber beneath the summit. The ground above it collapsed, forming the wide caldera we see today. Inside that basin, new eruptions continued, building cinder cones, spreading fresh lava, and leaving behind obsidian flows that still catch the light like glass. Today, the monument protects this entire volcanic complex. The caldera holds two main lakes, Paulina Lake and East Lake, separated by a central ridge. Pine forests come right down to the water's edge, and hot springs seep out in quiet corners along the shoreline, a reminder that heat still moves beneath the surface. On the caldera rim, viewpoints open to a full circle of land shaped by fire, with the Cascades rising on the horizon and the high desert stretching out in the other direction. One of the most striking places in Newberry is the Big Obsidian Flow. Walking the trail here feels like stepping into a frozen eruption. The ground is a jumble of black and silver glass, broken into sharp, angular pieces that pile on top of one another in waves. This flow is relatively young in geological terms, about 1,300 years old, and it shows it. The rock has not yet been fully softened by time. We can see exactly how the molten material cooled and fractured, and how a liquid landscape turned to stone. Nearby, the Lava River Cave tells another part of the story. This mile-long lava tube formed when the surface of a flowing lava stream cooled and hardened while molten rock continued to move beneath. When the flow eventually drained away, it left behind an empty tunnel that we can now walk through with lights and warm clothing. Moving down into the cave, the sounds from the surface disappear, replaced by the steady drip of water and the crunch of gravel underfoot. It's a reminder that much of volcanic activity happens out of sight, in channels and chambers beneath the ground. Newberry has a more recent human history as well. Indigenous peoples of the region knew this land long before it was mapped, hunting, fishing, and gathering here, and recognizing the caldera and its lakes as an important source of materials and food. Later, settlers moved into the surrounding forests and valleys, using the timber and grazing land, while scientists began to study the volcano itself in more detail. In 1990, Newberry National Volcanic Monument was established to protect these features and to make them accessible for people who wanted to understand the region beyond the surface. For visitors, the monument works best as a place to slow down and spend at least a full day, if not more. A common way to experience it is to start at the visitor center or one of the main access points near Paulina Lake, then make a circuit that includes a caldera viewpoint, a stop at the Big Obsidian Flow, sometime at one of the lakes, and, if there is energy left, either a walk into Lava River Cave or a short hike up one of the cinder cones. It isn't necessary to fit everything into one day. The point is to feel how all these pieces relate to each other. Lakes in a collapsed summit, glassy flows spilling across the floor, tubes and craters marking former vents. There are campgrounds around Paulina and East Lake, and rustic lodging options in the general area, which makes it possible to stay close and watch how the light changes over the caldera from morning to evening. Bend and nearby Sun River also serve as comfortable bases if we prefer to return to town at night. From there, the drive into the monument is short enough that a couple of focused day trips can cover most of what we want to see without rushing. The best times to visit are usually late spring through early autumn. Snow can linger on the higher roads well into the season, and in winter, many of the upper areas are inaccessible by car, turning into territory for snowmobiles and backcountry travelers instead. In the warmer months, clear air and long days make it easier to see the full sweep of the landscape and connect the dots between what we saw in Bend, at Smith Rock, and now here in this broad volcanic basin. Newberry ties directly into our larger Oregon journey because it makes the volcanic foundation of the state impossible to ignore. We've seen deep crater lakes, waterfalls cutting through basalt, headlands standing up to the Pacific, and cliffs rising from the high desert. Here, all of that is distilled into a single concentrated example, a vast volcano, still subtly alive, whose eruption shaped not just a single landmark, but an entire region. From this caldera, the trail can lead us outward again, toward dunes, rivers, and canyons, where wind and water have taken over the work that fire began. As we leave the high desert and descend toward the coast once more, the air cools and the scenery shifts into something entirely different. Forested hills give way to vast stretches of open sand, a landscape shaped not by fire, but by centuries of wind sweeping grains inland from the Pacific. Here, the coastline becomes fluid, always moving, always reshaping itself. What begins as a narrow strip of beach grows into rolling dunes that rise and fall like a pale, shifting sea. Here along the central coast, the landscape changes in a way that feels almost abrupt. One moment, the highway is winding through forests and coastal hills. The next, the trees open into a broad expanse of pale sand stretching toward the horizon. The Oregon Dunes are one of the largest stretches of coastal sand dunes in North America, a shifting, wind-shaped world that runs for nearly 50 miles between the towns of Florence and Coos Bay. Standing here, it's easy to forget you're still in Oregon. The Pacific roars somewhere beyond the outer ridges, and inland, the dunes rise and fall in long, rolling forms, each one shaped by forces older and larger than anything we can see. Geology explains the scale of it. For thousands of years, rivers carried sand from eroding rocks inland, some volcanic, some sedimentary. and deposited it along the coastline. Ocean waves ground that material down even further, spreading it along the shore. Then the wind took over. It pushed sand inland grain by grain, piling it into ridges, bowls, and towering dunes that are still on the move today. Some shift only inches a year. Others migrate much faster, swallowing tree lines, exposing old stumps, and reshaping the coastline in ways that remind us this place is never still. People have been part of this landscape for a very long time. Indigenous communities, including the Siuslaw and Coos peoples, lived along these shores for thousands of years, fishing the rivers, gathering from the forests, and moving across the dunes long before European settlers arrived. Later, the coast became a frontier of logging towns, fishing communities, and military installations. By the mid-20th century, recreation began to transform the area again, as visitors came to hike, explore, and ride across the dunes. Recognizing the uniqueness of this environment, Congress established the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area in 1972, setting aside a vast portion of this coastline for both preservation and responsible recreation. Experiencing the dunes depends on where you choose to enter them. In some areas, the landscape is alive with motion. The steady hum of off-highway vehicles climbing steep faces of sand, the arcs of dune buggies cresting ridges and sliding back down again. These sections of the dunes carry an unmistakable energy, drawing people who come for the sheer exhilaration of moving through an open, shifting desert by the sea. But there is another side to the dunes as well, quieter and more contemplative. South of Florence, long hiking corridors wind through protected areas where engines are absent, and the only sound is the wind moving across open sand. Here, the dunes blend with pockets of forest and the occasional freshwater lake, creating a patchwork of ecosystems within walking distance of one another. The sand absorbs sound, and the light changes throughout the day, giving the same ridge or slope a completely different character from morning to evening. On foggy days, the air turns silver, and the dunes feel endless. On sunny days, shadows carve out new shapes across the surface, revealing delicate ripples that weren't visible just hours before. Because the dunes stretch for so many miles, there is no single viewpoint that captures it all. Instead, visitors choose an entry point, an overlook near Florence, a trailhead by a dune lake, or one of the recreation areas farther south, and let the landscape unfold in its own time. Walking even a short distance into the dunes offers a sense of scale that photographs rarely capture. The sand underfoot is soft, the climb steady, and the crest of each dune reveals another ridge beyond it. Navigation feels simple, but the shifting terrain can surprise people. It's always wise to keep track of landmarks and pay attention to the wind. Most travelers use Florence or Reedsport as their base, both offering a mix of small motels, cabins, and campgrounds that make it easy to linger for a day or two. Staying overnight allows for a slower rhythm. Early mornings when the sand is cool and quiet, afternoons exploring nearby lakes and coastal forests, and evenings watching the light fade across the slopes. Spring and autumn tend to offer the best balance. Milder temperatures, clearer air, and fewer crowds than in peak summer. Winter brings storms, dramatic skies, and quieter trails, though conditions can change quickly. No matter the season, the dunes are at their most comfortable when the wind is calm, and many visitors plan their walks or rides in the early or late parts of the day. What makes the Oregon dunes so compelling in the context of our larger journey is how they shift the narrative. We've followed fire through volcanic landscapes and traced water's work through gorges and along the coast. Here, it is the wind that takes center stage, sculpting vast forms from the simplest of materials. The dunes remind us that Oregon is shaped by multiple forces working together over time, each one leaving its mark. From here, the coastline turns rugged again, and the landscape begins to narrow around one of the great rivers of the Pacific Northwest. As we head south, our trail leads toward a different kind of power, not the steady push of wind, but the swift, moving force of water cutting through wilderness. The Rogue begins high in the Cascade Range, gathering from springs and snowfields before cutting a long, determined path toward the Pacific. It winds through forests, canyons, and quiet valleys, shifting from calm, reflective water to fast, churning rapids in a way that makes the river feel alive, not just a feature on the map, but a character in Oregon's story. Long before settlers arrived, this river sustained indigenous peoples of the region, including Takelma, Shasta, and Athabascan-speaking communities, who lived, fished, hunted, and traveled along its banks for thousands of years. Salmon runs were central to life here, and the river served as both a source of food and a cultural backbone. In the mid-1800s, gold was discovered in the Rogue Valley, and a flood of miners pushed into the area, bringing a violent period of conflict known as the Rogue River Wars. By the time those wars ended, indigenous communities had been forcibly removed from their homelands, and the river valley had changed forever. The story is complex, and the land carries traces of that history even now. Through the 20th century, the Rogue evolved from a working river, supporting fishing, logging, and transport, into one of the most celebrated recreation rivers in the country. In 1968, it was among the first to be designated a National Wild and Scenic River, protecting more than 80 miles of its flow and preserving the wilderness character that countless visitors now come to experience. Standing along the river's edge, the sound of the current is constant. The water moves with purpose, slipping between smooth rocks and swirling around fallen logs. Overhead, osprey ride the air currents, and bald eagles circle their hunting grounds. Otters sometimes break the surface, and in the right season, salmon still push upriver, continuing a cycle that predates every town along the banks. The Rogue changes character depending on where you encounter it. Near Grants Pass and the upper stretches, the river moves between wooded banks and rocky outcrops, offering a mix of calm water and playful rapids. This is where many rafting trips begin, multi-day journeys that travel through remote canyon walls, quiet side creeks, and stretches where the only sounds come from the river and the wind in the pines. Even a single day on the water can give a deep sense of how wild this river feels, especially in the designated wilderness sections where the modern world seems to fall away. Farther downstream, near Gold Beach, the Rogue widens and gains momentum as it nears the ocean. Here, jet boat tours carry visitors into the lower canyon, offering access to stretches of the river that would otherwise take days to reach. These trips glide past cliffs, waterfalls, and narrow bends where the canyon walls press close, giving a sense of the river's scale without requiring the physical demands of paddling. For those who prefer to stay on foot, the Rogue River Trail offers a different perspective. Running along the canyon walls for more than 40 miles, the trail reveals views that shift constantly. High cliffs, deep pools of green water, narrow shelves of rock, and forests that open suddenly to the river's edge. Hikers cross old bridges, pass historic lodges, and sometimes glimpse rafters navigating rapids far below. Visiting the Rogue can be as simple or as involved as you want it to be. Many travelers use Grants Pass or Medford as a base for the upper river, with plenty of small lodges, cabins, and riverside inns that feel built around the rhythm of the water. Those exploring the lower Rogue often stay in Gold Beach, a small coastal town where fishing boats leave at dawn and ocean winds mix with the river air. Spring and summer offer the warmest days on the water, while early autumn brings clear skies and quieter trails. Winter has a beauty of its own, with mist rising off the river and deep green forests framing the banks, though many services scale back during the colder months. What makes the Rogue River stand out in our Oregon journey is how completely it shifts the mood. After dunes shaped by wind and volcanic landscapes shaped by fire, the Rogue reminds us that moving water has its own kind of power, carving canyons, sustaining life, and carrying stories from one generation to the next. It is a river that has defined the land and the people along its path, and even today, it feels like a thread that ties southern Oregon together. As we continue south and inland, the landscape begins to rise again. The forests grow denser, the air cools, and the road climbs toward a place where Oregon's volcanic history takes on a new dimension, not in the open air this time, but deep underground. Next, we head toward the Oregon Caves. Deep in the Siskiyou Mountains of southwestern Oregon, the forest closes in, and the road begins to coil uphill. The air cools, the trees grow taller, and the outside world feels a little more distant with every bend. Tucked into this landscape is a place where Oregon's story moves underground. The caves sit about 20 miles east of the small town of Cave Junction, in rugged country near the Oregon-California border. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples lived throughout this region, hunting, gathering, and moving through these mountains, even if there's no clear evidence that they entered the cave itself. The written history of the caves, as far as we know it, begins in 1874, when a local resident named Elijah Davidson followed his dog into a dark opening in the rock while hunting. By candlelight, he explored enough to realize this was no ordinary hole in the hillside, but an entire hidden world. In the decades that followed, promoters tried and mostly failed to turn the caves into private tourist attractions. Interest grew slowly until the early 1900s, when the United States began using the new Antiquities Act to protect special places on public land. In 1909, President William Howard Taft established Oregon Caves National Monument, handing federal protection to both the cave and the surrounding forest. As roads improved and automobiles became more common in the 1920s, visitation climbed. In 1933, management passed from the Forest Service to the National Park Service, and a year later, a 6-story lodge, the Oregon Cave Chateau, opened beside the entrance, built in a rustic style that matched the forest around it. The chateau would later become a National Historic Landmark and remains one of the most distinctive mountain hotels in the state. Geologically, these are not typical limestone caverns. Oregon caves formed in marble, limestone that was transformed by heat and pressure roughly 190 million years ago as fragments of ancient seafloor collided with the edge of North America and were lifted into what we now call the Klamath Mountains. Long after that, slightly acidic groundwater began seeping through fractures in the marble. Over hundreds of thousands to a few million years, that water slowly dissolved the rock, enlarging cracks into passageways and chambers. The result is a network of about 3 miles of mapped passages decorated with flowstone, draperies, stalactites, stalagmites, and other formations built one drop at a time. These are the marble halls of Oregon that early writers described with a mix of scientific curiosity and awe. On the surface, the monument and preserve now cover more than 4,500 acres of forest, creeks, and high ridges, including Mount Elijah and the headwaters of small streams that eventually feed the Illinois and Rogue rivers. Below ground, a subterranean stream known as the River Styx flows through the cave and emerges at the entrance as Cave Creek, the only underground river included in the National Wild and Scenic River System. It's a reminder that even here, where the rock seems solid, water is still doing its quiet work. Exploring the cave is not something you do on your own. The only way in is with ranger-led tours, offered seasonally from roughly mid-April through early November, depending on snow and road conditions. The standard tour lasts around 90 minutes and moves through a series of narrow corridors, stairways, and chambers, with more than 500 steps and passages where the ceiling drops low enough that you need to duck. Inside, the temperature holds steady at about 44 degrees Fahrenheit, no matter what the weather is doing outside, so warm clothing and solid footwear are essential. The experience itself is layered. At the entrance, daylight still spills in, and the forest is just a few steps away. As the group moves deeper, the light changes. Headlamps and cave lighting pick out the textures of the marble walls, rippled flowstone, delicate soda straws, curtains of calcite that look like folded fabric. The air is cool and still. Drips echo faintly in the darker sections, and voices soften in the enclosed space. The guide pauses at key points to explain how water shaped each formation, how long they took to grow, and what scientists have discovered here, including fossils of large mammals like ancient bears and even a jaguar preserved in the cave sediments. There are practical rules that come with this kind of access. To protect fragile formations, touching the cave walls is discouraged. To protect bats from white nose syndrome, visitors are asked not to bring in any clothing or gear that has been inside other caves or mines, and special decontamination measures are in place for certain tours. These steps may feel strict in the moment, but they are part of what keeps the cave alive and open to future visitors. Back on the surface, trails lead into the surrounding forest. Short paths like the Cliff Nature Trail and Old Growth Trail loop past marble outcrops, creeks, and large Douglas firs, including one known simply as Big Tree, thought to be among the widest of its kind in Oregon. Longer routes climb toward higher viewpoints and into the newer preserve lands added in 2014, where meadows and ridgelines give a broader view of the Siskiyous. The contrast is striking. Dense, sunlit forest above, cool marble corridors below. Staying here can be as simple or as involved as you like. When the Oregon Caves Chateau is open, it provides a rare chance to sleep right next to a national monument in a historic lodge that feels very much of its era. Wood, stone, creaking floors, and a dining room that looks out toward the stream. When the chateau is closed for renovation, or if a different style of stay appeals more, Cave Junction offers small motels, cabins, and bed and breakfast options down in the valley, while Grants Pass, about an hour and a half away by road, serves as a larger base with more amenities. Camping is available at nearby campgrounds run by the Park Service, the Forest Service, and private operators within the preserve and surrounding forest. For most people, Oregon Caves works best as a focused stop rather than a rushed detour. A full day allows time for a cave tour, a meal at or near the monument, and a walk on one of the forest trails. The drive itself is part of the experience, a narrow mountain road that reinforces the sense of leaving the everyday world behind and heading somewhere a little removed. In the context of our wider Oregon journey, the caves add a different dimension to everything we've seen so far. Crater lakes, river gorges, sea stacks, dunes, and high desert cliffs all show how the surface has been shaped by fire, wind, and water in motion. Here, that same story continues in the dark. Water dissolving marble in silence, building new formations drop by drop in a place where time moves at a different pace. When we emerge back into daylight and step out of the cave entrance, the forest feels brighter, the air warmer, and the sense of space almost amplified. From here, the road will carry us east, away from the deep shade of the Siskiyous, and out toward a very different kind of landscape, one where color, layers, and open skies tell their own version of Oregon's past. The Painted Hills feel like a place where time is visible. As we leave the forests and river canyons behind and move into eastern Oregon, the land slowly opens into wider valleys and drier air. Then the road bends, the hills lift, and suddenly the ground itself turns to bands of red, gold, and black, as if someone has brushed color across the slopes and walked away. Welcome to the Painted Hills, one of the 3 units of John Day Fossil Beds National Monument. These hills are not just beautiful, they are a visible climate record. Between roughly 34 and 32 million years ago, this basin shifted from a warm, almost tropical environment to a cooler, more temperate one. The soils that formed during those different phases are still here, stacked in layers. The deep reds mark ancient, heavily weathered soils formed in warmer, wetter conditions. The lighter yellows and tans developed later when the climate became cooler and drier. Together, they preserve a sequence of past climate change that scientists still study today. This is part of why the John Day region is so important. Taken as a whole, its fossil beds preserve one of the longest, most continuous records of plant and animal evolution anywhere in the Cenozoic. About 40 million years of Earth history, captured in rock and sediment. Within the Painted Hills unit specifically, you're standing above ancient soils and leaf beds known as the Bridge Creek flora, with fossil plants dating from roughly 39 to 30 million years ago, and even small outcrops containing mammal fossils from about 30 to 27 million years ago. The modern history of this place is quieter but still significant. Fossils from the broader John Day area caught scientists' attention as early as the mid-1800s, drawing geologists and paleontologists from around the country. Through the early 1900s, the state of Oregon began acquiring pieces of land at Sheep Rock, Clarno, and here at the Painted Hills as state parks, recognizing that this landscape was both scientifically valuable and fragile. In 1975, those parks were transferred to the National Park Service to form John Day Fossil Beds National Monument, ensuring long-term protection for the hills and the fossil record they contain. On the ground, though, all that history feels distilled into simple elements: color, shape, and silence. The Painted Hills unit lies about 10 miles northwest of the town of Mitchell, down a side road that gradually leaves ranch land behind and slips into something more otherworldly. The hills rise in soft, rounded forms, striped with red, tan, orange, and black claystones. When the sun is low, early morning or late afternoon, the colors deepen and shadows define each fold. On overcast days, the palette softens and you start noticing smaller details. Tiny cracks, patterns like brush strokes, and the way one layer fades into another. A network of short trails lets you experience the unit from different angles while keeping the fragile soils protected. The Painted Hills Overlook Trail runs along a low ridge and offers classic wide views of the main hills. This is where most people first understand the scale of the place. Further along, the Carroll Rim Trail climbs gradually to a higher viewpoint. From the top of this ridgeline, you can see the entire basin, the waves of color at your feet, the surrounding valley, and the contrast between the bare hills and the sage and grassland beyond. Closer to the hills themselves, the Painted Cove Trail leads along a short boardwalk through popcorn-textured claystones in shades of red, lavender, and yellow. It's one of the most intimate ways to see the surface of the formations without damaging them, and the boardwalk keeps feet off the delicate crust. Nearby, Leaf Hill preserves an old fossil dig site where paleontologists once worked through layers of ancient leaves. Interpretive signs explain what was found here and what it tells us about past forests. Farther west, Red Scar Knoll, also called Red Hill, ends in a striking two-toned hill of red and tan claystone, a simple formation that shows just how sharp the boundary between different soil horizons can be. None of these walks are long. That's part of the appeal. You're not here for distance, you're here for perspective. A visit to the Painted Hills is often about taking your time, driving slowly between trailheads, walking a loop or an out and back, stopping at overlooks to watch how the light changes. Many travelers anchor their visit in or around Mitchell, a small town that serves as the practical gateway to this unit, with basic places to stay and eat. The monument itself doesn't offer lodging or food, so planning around the town or other communities along Highway 26 becomes part of the rhythm of the day. The best seasons to visit are usually spring and autumn. In spring, wildflowers add flashes of color against the already vivid hills, and temperatures are often comfortable for walking. Autumn brings clear air, long views, and lower sun angles that emphasize the contours. Summer can be hot and dry with little shade, while winter sees more cloud cover and the possibility of snow, which can add its own stark beauty, but also makes travel more challenging. What makes the Painted Hills truly worth their place on our Oregon Trail is not just that they're photogenic, though they are, but that they make deep time visible in a way almost anyone can understand. Each stripe of color is a former ground surface, a soil that once supported plant life under a different climate. Each band is an earlier Oregon, long gone but still recorded here. When we stand at an overlook and look across those layers, we're not just seeing scenery. We're looking across millions of years of change stacked on top of each other. We've seen Oregon shaped by fire in its volcanoes, by water in its lakes and rivers, by wind along its coast and dunes. In the Painted Hills, we see the long, slow story underneath all of that. Climate shifting, ecosystems rising and falling, and time leaving a record in color and clay. From here, the route turns northeast again into higher country. The rolling hills give way to larger, more rugged mountains, and the horizon starts to fill with sharp, snow-touched peaks. Our next stop takes us into a region many people call Oregon's Alps, a place of deep lakes, high meadows, and long trails leading into quiet backcountry. As we leave the dry hills and fossil beds behind and push farther into northeastern Oregon, the land begins to rise. The sky feels bigger, the air a little sharper, and then, in the distance, a wall of peaks appears, shouldering up against the horizon. At their feet, a long, deep lake stretches out like a mirror laid between mountains. This is the Wallowa country, Wallowa Lake, the town of Joseph, and the Wallowa Mountains, often called Oregon's Alps. The story here doesn't start with tourism or even with the small towns that dot the valley. For countless generations, this was and remains the homeland of the Wallowa band of the Nez Perce, the Nimiapuu. Wallowa Lake and the valley around it were part of a treaty-reserved homeland in 1855, before gold and new agreements pushed settlers in and pushed the Nimiapuu out. By 1877, conflict and broken promises forced Chief Joseph and his people into the long, tragic flight that would end in exile far from here. The lake, the valley, and the mountains are still tied to that story. Monuments and place names around Wallowa Lake and the town of Joseph keep that memory close to the surface. Only after that period did ranching, farming, and small settlements begin to define the modern shape of Wallowa County. Even today, it remains one of Oregon's least populous regions, with only a few thousand people spread across the whole county and small towns like Enterprise, Joseph, and Wallowa acting as its main centers. Joseph, at the north end of Wallowa Lake, has grown into a compact, walkable mountain town with lodging, cafes, and a surprisingly strong art scene for its size. Bronze foundries and galleries line the main street, and larger-than-life sculptures form an outdoor art walk against a backdrop of sharp, glaciated peaks. The mountains themselves are what pull most people here. The Wallowas rise steeply above the valley floor, with many summits climbing over 9,000 feet. Glaciers carved deep U-shaped valleys and left behind a chain of high lakes and meadows, now protected as part of the Eagle Cap Wilderness, more than 350,000 acres of high country with over 500 miles of trails threading through it. Wallowa Lake at the foot of the range is a classic ribbon lake, held in place by massive moraines left by Pleistocene glaciers that last advanced into the valley around 17,000 years ago. Standing on its shore, you can see how those ancient ice rivers shaped the basin and built the natural walls that now hold the water in place. Most visits here begin at the lake. On summer days, the south end feels like a small alpine resort, a state park, campgrounds, lodges, cabins, and a handful of restaurants and shops tucked between the shoreline and the rising slopes. The surface of the lake stays cold and clear, fed by the Wallowa River. People paddle, swim, fish from small boats, or simply sit at the edge and watch the changing light on the water and the mountains. From the lake's edge, an aerial tramway climbs almost straight up the flank of Mount Howard. Built in the late 1960s, the Wallowa Lake Tramway lifts gondolas from roughly 400 feet to over 800 feet in about 15 minutes, making it one of the steepest four-passenger gondolas in North America. At the summit, short, well-marked loop trails lead out across alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers in midsummer, with viewpoints that look down over Wallowa Lake, out across the Eagle Cap Wilderness, and east toward the country that falls away into Hell's Canyon. On a clear day, the sense of space is enormous. Distant ranges stack up along the horizon, and the valley below feels like a small, self-contained world. For those who want to go beyond viewpoints and into the heart of the range, the Eagle Cap Wilderness starts just up the road from the lake. From trailheads like Wallowa Lake, Tupan, or East Eagle, paths follow rivers and climb steadily into high basins. Popular routes lead to Ice Lake, Aneroid Lake, and a network of alpine basins that sit between the highest peaks. Day hikes can take you to ridgelines and lower lakes. Multi-day trips open up loops that cross high passes and connect valleys. Out there, the soundtrack narrows to streams, wind in the grass, and the distant calls of hawks. The granite walls and cirques give the place that Alps feeling people talk about, but the character remains distinctly Oregonian, wilder, less crowded, and with a sense that the mountains are still doing their own thing, regardless of who happens to be visiting. Back down in Joseph and around the lake, the experience softens. The main street offers coffee shops and bakeries, small pubs and restaurants that lean on local produce, regional beef, and trout from nearby waters. It's not about fine dining. It's about simple, satisfying food after a long day outside. Burgers on a deck with mountain views, a plate of breakfast before heading to the trailhead, ice cream on a hot afternoon walk past the bronze sculptures. Lodging ranges from basic motels and historic inns in town to lakefront lodges, cabins, and campgrounds closer to the water. However you choose to stay, the mountains are never far from sight. Timing matters here. Late June through September is usually the most reliable window for high country access. Snow has melted off most main trails, passes are open, and the lakefront is fully awake for the season. Spring brings a mix of lingering snow and early green in the valley, while autumn trades crowds for crisp air and golden larch in some of the higher basins. In winter, the valley quiets. Snow wraps the peaks, some roads and services scale back, and the mountains feel more distant, beautiful, but less accessible unless you're prepared for snow travel. Within our larger journey through Oregon, the Wallowas occupy a special place. After the painted hills, where time is written in layers of clay and color, the Wallowas show a different side of deep time, carved in rock, filled with ice, and still rising over a valley that has been home, battleground, and refuge. This region holds some of the most dramatic mountain scenery in the state, but it also carries one of its heaviest human stories. To stand on the shore of Wallowa Lake or look out from the top of Mount Howard is to see both at once: beauty that draws visitors from far away, and a homeland whose original people were forced to leave. From these peaks and ridgelines, the land to the east begins to fall away. Beyond the Wallowas lies a different kind of depth, not high country this time, but one of the deepest river gorges on the continent, where the Snake River has cut a trench between Oregon and Idaho. That's where our trail leads next. From the high country of the Wallowas, the land begins to fall away. Forested slopes open into long descending ridges, the valleys grow wider, and the horizon to the east stretches farther than it seemed just a few miles before. Eventually, the ground drops so sharply that the landscape seems to split open. This is Hell's Canyon, the deep trench carved by the Snake River, forming the border between Oregon and Idaho. It is the deepest river gorge in North America, deeper in places than the Grand Canyon, though far more remote, far less visited, and defined not by tourism, but by the raw shape of the land itself. Standing at one of the viewpoints on the Oregon side, the first thing you notice is scale. Ridges stacked behind ridges, folding into the distance like a series of green and amber waves, with the river glinting far below as a thin, restless line of silver. Long before any modern maps, this canyon was home to indigenous peoples, including bands of the Nez Perce, Shoshone, and other tribes who moved through the region seasonally, fishing the Snake River, hunting along the benches, and leaving behind petroglyphs that still survive on canyon walls. Their history here stretches back thousands of years, much longer than the brief gold mining and homesteading chapters that followed in the 19th century. When settlers arrived, they found a harsh but fertile place along the water, narrow gardens, orchards clinging to river terraces, and ranches built wherever the canyon allowed a bit of flat ground. Some of their cabins and outbuildings still stand, weathered but visible from the river or along certain trails, a reminder that even the most imposing landscapes were once lived in. Geographically, Hell's Canyon is the product of deep time and relentless water. The Snake River cuts between the Wallowa Mountains to the west and Idaho's Seven Devils Range to the east. The relief between the river and the highest points on either rim creates the immense depth for which the canyon is known. On the Oregon side, the land rises in steep, layered steps with basalt cliffs, grassy slopes, pockets of conifer forest, and exposed ridgelines that glow gold in the late light. The contrast is striking. Hot, dry canyon walls rising from a corridor of green where cottonwoods and willows gather along the water's edge. Most people experience Hell's Canyon from above. The drive to Hell's Canyon Overlook takes you along remote forest roads that eventually open onto a sweeping viewpoint. From here, the canyon unfolds in all directions, a wide, dramatic cut in the earth that seems too large to grasp in a single moment. The air is quiet at the rim, broken only by wind and the occasional cry of a hawk circling below. In the distance, the snake of the river glimmers through layers of heat and shadow, its shimmer hinting at how far down the bottom truly lies. But experiencing the canyon from the river is an entirely different encounter. Jet boat tours leave from downstream access points and push through powerful currents, bouncing through rapids and slowing at quieter stretches where the canyon walls rise like fortresses on either side. Rafters and boaters traveling upstream sections of the Snake speak of mornings when mist hangs low over the water, and evenings when the canyon glows amber before fading into shadow. Down at river level, the walls feel impossibly tall, the silence deeper, the wildlife closer. Bighorn sheep on the cliffs, eagles overhead, mule deer stepping out at dusk. Some trails offer a middle ground, leading hikers along benches above the river or into side canyons where remnants of old homesteads appear, fruit trees that still bloom, rusted tools left behind, the outlines of gardens built in places where the river once offered narrow but steady life. These fragments of history soften the canyon's severity and remind us that despite its ruggedness, people made homes here, and in some ways, the land still remembers them. Visiting Hell's Canyon requires intention. There are no quick detours, no major highways skirting the rim. Travelers often base themselves in Joseph or Enterprise for the overlook, or in smaller communities like Halfway, if they want deeper access into the canyon country. Roads are seasonal at higher elevations. Late spring through early autumn generally offers the best chance at clear access and wide views. In summer, heat settles low in the gorge, and afternoons shimmer with rising thermals. In autumn, the air sharpens, and the contours become even clearer, each ridge standing out in crisp relief. Winter buries much of the upper country in snow, keeping the canyon quiet and unreachable for most travelers. What gives Hell's Canyon its place in our Oregon journey is not just its depth or its drama, but the way it shifts our perspective. After mountains that rise toward the sky, here the land opens downward into a vast geological record carved by water over millions of years. It is the opposite of the Wallowas, yet inseparable from them, two expressions of the same forces shaping Oregon in different directions. And from this great canyon, the path of our journey turns south into one of the most remote and wide-open regions of the entire state. Ahead lies a landscape defined not by forests or rivers, but by desert, silence, and a mountain that towers over a dry lake bed like a sentinel watching the edge of the world. In Oregon's far southeast, the map starts to empty out. Towns thin to single names on long stretches of highway, fences run for miles with no houses in sight, and the horizon feels farther away than it does anywhere else in the state. Out here, two features suddenly take over the landscape: a flat, pale basin that looks like a dried sea, and a single mountain rising sharply above it like a wall. This is the Alvord Desert, and above it, Steens Mountain. Geologically, the scene is simple and dramatic. Steens is a huge fault block mountain, lifted and tilted by forces deep in the earth, its high western face carved by ancient glaciers, and its eastern side dropping almost a vertical mile toward the desert floor. Below, the Alvord is the remnant of a former lake bed, a broad, cracked playa, where water once gathered and then slowly disappeared. The mountain catches what little moisture moves across this corner of Oregon. The desert on its lee side is what's left when the clouds have nothing more to give. People have lived in and around this basin for thousands of years. Northern Paiute bands moved through this region long before fences and road signs, hunting, gathering, and following water and grazing where they could. Later came scattered ranches, rough tracks, and a handful of outposts that still anchor the human story out here. Places like Fields, French Glen, and the hot springs that have been a quiet stopover for travelers long before they were marked on travel blogs. Life in this corner of Oregon has always been about distance, resourcefulness, and paying close attention to the land. Steens Mountain itself is best understood from its high road. When conditions allow, the Steens Mountain Loop Road climbs from Valley Ranchland up onto the broad back of the mountain, winding past aspen groves and meadows into a high, wind-stripped plateau. Pullouts look straight down into deep glacial gorges like Kiger and Wild Horse, where ice once carved clean U-shapes into the rock. From the east rim, the view drops thousands of feet to the Alvord Desert, the playa spread out below like a sheet of paper, the line between mountain and flatland almost brutally clear. On clear days, it feels like standing on the edge of a continent. Down on the desert floor, the Alvord is about space and silence. Standing on the playa, there's no obvious scale at first. The ground is a cracked mosaic of pale mud, and the horizon runs unbroken in every direction except where Steens rises. On dry days, the surface hardens enough that people walk, cycle, and sometimes even drive out away from the edge, though it only takes one step into soft mud to understand why locals watch the weather carefully. At night, when the wind drops, the sky can feel almost overwhelming. With no city nearby to wash it out, the Milky Way is not a concept here, it's a visible band. Experiences in this region are simple but intense. Some visitors soak in open-air hot pools on the edge of the desert, watching steam curl into cold air while the playa stretches away in front of them. Others spend a day driving the Steens Loop, stopping at overlooks, watching pronghorn move across the sage below, or catching the aspen turning gold in autumn. A few treat the Alvord like a temporary playground, bringing land sailors, ultralight aircraft, or off-road rigs when conditions are safe, then leaving again before the weather changes. The land doesn't offer much in the way of distraction. What you remember later tends to be light, wind, and how small everything feels against the backdrop of the mountain. Practicalities here are not an afterthought. Distances are long, fuel stops are rare, and weather swings hard between day and night. Most travelers base themselves in tiny hubs like French Glen, with its historic hotel and basic services, or Fields, where you can fill a tank and grab a meal before pushing farther. Others camp near the mountain or along the edge of the playa, fully aware that strong wind, dust, and sudden rain can change the mood quickly. Late spring to early autumn is usually the most forgiving window. Snow and mud can close high roads well into summer and return early in the fall. Out here, planning ahead isn't overcautious. It's just how you get to leave with good memories. In the context of our Oregon Trail, the Alvord Desert and Steens Mountain feel like the state's final frontier. After coasts, forests, rivers, canyons, and alpine lakes, this is Oregon stripped down to two elements: a single massive ridge and a vast, empty floor at its feet. It's a place that asks for quiet more than commentary, and it leaves a different kind of impression, not the rush of a waterfall or the thrill of a busy trail, but the weight of space and the sense of standing at the edge of something very old and very large. From here, our path bends back toward the spine of the Cascades, trading this remote desert wall for a different kind of mountain altogether. A solitary, volcanic peak that has watched over much of this state's history and become one of its most enduring symbols. Next, we turn toward Mount Hood and the final chapter of our journey. After the open silence of the Alvord Desert, the road begins to rise again. The horizon shifts, clouds gather, and the air takes on that coolness that only comes from higher country. Mile by mile, the landscape folds back into forest, and then, almost suddenly, a single mountain appears ahead. White, symmetrical, and unmistakable. A peak that seems to define the sky around it. Mount Hood has been a governing presence in this region far longer than the state has existed. Indigenous nations, including the Multnomah, Warm Springs, Wasco, and other Chinookan and Sahaptin-speaking peoples, knew this peak as Y East. It shaped their stories, their understanding of the land, and the routes they traveled across the Cascades. The Euro-American name Mount Hood came later, in 1792, when Lieutenant William Broughton named it after a British admiral. But long before maps and naming conventions, the mountain was already a force, a glaciated stratovolcano rising over 11,000 feet, feeding rivers, influencing weather, and anchoring the entire northern landscape of Oregon. Driving up toward the southern flank of the mountain, the trees tighten, the shadows deepen, and the road eventually arrives at one of Oregon's great architectural treasures. Timberline Lodge. Built in 1936-37 as a Works Progress Administration project, the lodge was handcrafted by local artisans who carved, wove, forged, and assembled nearly every detail inside. Heavy timbers, basalt stonework, hand-cut newel posts, ironwork, woven textiles, carved animals. It feels like a mountain myth made real. The lodge itself stands at about 6,000 feet in elevation, looking directly up at Hood's permanent snowfields. Today, it's a National Historic Landmark, still welcoming hikers, skiers, and travelers who come to warm themselves beside the massive stone hearths just as visitors have for nearly a century. Life on the mountain changes with the season. In winter, heavy snow transforms everything into a clean, bright world of ridges, bowls, groomers, and backcountry lines. Skiers carve paths under the lift towers, snowboarders gather near the lodge, and the air carries that unmistakable sound of edges on fresh snow. As spring arrives, the lower slopes melt, but higher up the snow lingers, allowing some of the longest ski seasons in North America. By summer, hikers fill the trails that weave across wildflower meadows and pumice slopes. And on certain days, the surreal happens. Skiers slice down summer snowfields, while hikers in t-shirts stand at trail junctions pointing toward the summit. Descending from the lodge toward the Columbia River, the world softens. Forests part to reveal the Hood River Valley, a fertile basin of orchards, farms, and vineyards, all held beneath the watchful presence of Mount Hood. This is the heart of the Hood River Fruit Loop, a meandering route through family orchards where the air smells of blossoms in spring and ripe fruit in summer. Cherries, berries, peaches, pears, apples. The valley carries a seasonal rhythm that draws visitors back year after year. Farm stands and wineries dot the rural roadsides, each one offering something different: a fresh cider, a pie cooling on a counter, a bottle of wine from grapes grown in volcanic soil, or just a moment to stand between rows of trees with the mountain rising white and clear above them. Continue north, and the valley meets the broad sweep of the Columbia River. Here lies Hood River, a small city defined by two forces: the river at its doorstep and the mountain behind it. Wind pours through the Columbia Gorge, turning the river into one of the world's great playgrounds for windsurfing and kiteboarding. Cafes spill onto sidewalks, breweries hum with conversation, and the town shifts easily between mountain culture and river culture, with backpackers, cyclists, paddlers, and families all weaving through the same streets. It feels vibrant without being overwhelming, a place with enough life for a traveler to settle into, but still deeply tied to the landscape around it. Visiting this region isn't about choosing one experience. It's about letting the mountain set the rhythm. Some stay in Hood River for the food, the views, and the easy access to both river and forest. Others stay up on the mountain itself, waking to the sunrise hitting Hood's upper slopes. Many pair a morning at Timberline Lodge, with an afternoon exploring orchards or walking through town, then end the day watching alpenglow settle over the peak. The best seasons depend on the traveler: winter for snow, spring for blossoms, summer for hiking and long golden evenings, autumn for orchard colors and crisp valley air. As the final chapter of our Oregon journey, Mount Hood brings everything together. Here is fire, the volcanic core that built the mountain. Here is water, snowfields feeding rivers that sustain both cities and orchards. Here is wind, shaping life in the gorge below. Here is time, indigenous homelands, early explorers, WPA-era craftsmanship, and generations of people who have made this landscape part of their identity. Hood rises above forests, valleys, and towns, binding together regions that feel completely different from one another, yet unmistakably part of the same state. Standing before Mount Hood, it's easy to look back on everything we've traveled through. Crater lakes carved by ancient eruptions, waterfalls plunging through basalt, rugged coastlines, quiet fishing towns, high desert cliffs, volcanic calderas, river canyons, fossil-filled hills, alpine peaks, and remote desert basins. Oregon isn't one landscape, it's a mosaic. And this mountain, quiet but commanding, stands as the final reminder of how many forces shaped it. As the light fades across the ridge and the last glow touches the summit, our journey ends where Oregon so often begins, with a mountain that defines the skyline, the seasons, and the imagination of the place itself. This is Mount Hood, and this is where our trail comes to a close. As our trail comes to an end, we can look back at Oregon not as a single destination, but as a living tapestry of landscapes and stories. We traveled from deep volcanic calderas to roaring waterfalls, from rugged coastlines to the quiet glow of desert mornings. We walked through ancient fossil beds, crossed high alpine valleys, followed wild rivers, and stood on the edge of canyons carved over millions of years. Each stop showed us something different, not just about the land, but about the people who have called it home, shaped it, protected it, and been shaped by it in return. Oregon is a state defined by contrast, but bound together by its sense of wonder. And whether you've explored these places before, or discovered them for the first time with us today, we hope this journey gave you a deeper appreciation for the beauty and complexity of this remarkable corner of the world. Thank you for traveling with Era Trails. We wish you a great day wherever you are, and if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again as we explore more of the world's extraordinary places.